Hello there everyone, and welcome to me attempting to beat Sekiro with prosthetics and parries only, without using mods. You may be wondering, why isn't the video just called prosthetics only? And the answer to that is that then the video would be 5 seconds long. It is just straight up impossible. But I was curious to find out how close we can possibly get to that point. And as a result, parries are in the video title now. Also, apologies if during the video you hear me sound in 20 different ways, my microphone is just ass. So without further ado, let's begin. While you enjoy my tutorial experience in the background, let's talk about the rules of this run. First off, obviously, no usage of mods is allowed, hence I cannot have an infinite amount of spirit emblems. Damage must only be dealt using prosthetics. This means that usage of items, Kusabimaro, and the Mortal Blade to deal damage is banned. This rule specifically comes back to bite me in the ass because it also includes using Sekiro's sword in both combat arts and prosthetic combos, rendering some prosthetics essentially useless. Note however that attacking without causing damage is allowed as it doesn't have any real impact on the run. What does have an impact on the run however is the jump counter, which deals a lot of posture damage. However, it also deals a tiny amount of health damage when you perform it, so jump counters are also banned. Death blows and stealth blows can only be performed on bosses or mini-bosses, but not on normal enemies, since that would make the run pointless. Parrying is allowed, because without it the run would be completely impossible. If, for any reasons, I break any of those rules, I must immediately off myself, regardless of how harsh the consequences are. Finally, I will be playing the game on normal mode instead of charmless, as I do not know if it would be possible on charmless, neither do I have the balls to try. With all of this out of the way, let's get started. The fact that I'm allowed to use only prosthetics to deal damage immediately becomes a problem because, as you already know, prosthetics require spirit emblems in order to be used. And at the start of the game, I have precisely 0 of them. So I decide to just loot everything I can whilst avoiding enemies along the way. The problem is that will only get me so far, as there is a finite amount of obtainable items, money, and emblems by just looting, and it is nowhere near enough to last me for the whole run, so that is also not a viable option. This leaves me with the most natural option, killing enemies to acquire emblems. However, this is where the first major roadblock of the run comes. As the rules state, I cannot death blow or stealth blow enemies. I can break their posture with parrying, sure, but to kill them would require to death blow them afterwards. Thus, I can only kill them using prosthetics, but without death blows. Sounds simple enough. I mean, I can just scavenge a couple of emblems and simply farm enemies over and over, right? Wrong. Most enemies at this stage of the game require more emblems to kill than the amount they give me back in money. For example, the Ashna warriors require 2 hits with the axe prosthetic or 4 emblems to kill. They yield 11 sen or 1.1 emblem, which is not even close to justify killing them. This means that I need an enemy that gives me back more than I spend to kill it. I need to break the law of equivalent exchange, like the good full metal shinobi that I am. One such enemy, well, more specifically the only such enemy at this stage of the game, are the raider archers in Hirata Estate. They have very low health and can be killed with only 1 hit from the shinobi axe, and upon dying give 23 gold back. So they require 2 emblems to kill and would give back 2.3 emblems. So this is great. I found my emblems. Then all that is left to do is... shit. Scratch what I just said, the archers cannot be killed with 1 hit from the shinobi axe. Yet. But how can I get more damage on the axe, you might wonder.
My name is Kyobu Masataka Oniwa!
And even better, to get to him, I must first go through the WWE ring. Lovely. Unfortunately, there isn't really any other alternative because there is no other way to obtain emblems. So Chained Ogre it is. Upon first glance, what do you see? You see the mini-boss in the distance, right? Nice. So that's problem 1. However, do you also spot those 2 retards over there? Great. So do I. That right there is problem 2, and arguably the bigger problem. Because, ideally, a boss fight should look like this. And not this. In fact, this serves as a great introduction to gang fights in this run. Most of the times when a boss is surrounded by enemies, the player would want to get rid of the enemies first and then fight the boss one-on-one. However, because I have very limited emblems to work with, I must use them tactically. This means that I must find some workaround to either avoid all the enemies when fighting a boss, or kill them and then somehow have enough emblems for the boss. Although the second option may sound like it contradicts what I just said about being tactical with resources, I managed to find a trick to negate this issue. I will show you in a bit what I'm talking about. So when I fight the ogre initially, I think to myself, how bad could it be? And just aggro it along with the two other enemies. As you might have guessed, it did not end well. I tried to bait and kite the enemies in such a way that I could retain the aggro of only the ogre, but it doesn't work out. They're just super persistent. Furthermore, even though it is very easy to stealth blow the ogre for its first health bar, it is definitely not very easy to dodge the boss as well as two of its simps. But then I remember something. Do you recall this item? I certainly didn't up until now. I think I used it only a couple times on my very first playthrough and then never touched it again, except maybe to sell it to a vendor. But now, this is the item that will make this fight bearable. I throw some shards to distract the two guys so they face away from the ogre, aggro the ogre, and it works. Even though the guy is still technically looking at me, he somehow doesn't notice me. Maybe he's just short-sighted or something, I don't know. I don't complain either though, as now I can actually properly do this mini-boss. On a side note, I gotta say it really does warm my heart when in such runs you make use of items and strategies you would rarely use otherwise, and they turn out to be a pretty elegant solution to your problem. It feels really satisfying to overcome challenges in such ways. Okay, now back to the run. Even though I can now fight a normal 1v1, as if everything so far wasn't enough, there is one last hurdle, the health bar. I just do not do enough damage to kill the ogre straight up. The cap of 15 emblems allows for 7 hits, which do less than half of its HP. I get pretty discouraged when I first see this. However, there is something else I notice, the posture damage. This is it. At this very moment, something essential to this run clicked with me. For the vast majority of both bosses and mini-bosses in this game, I do not have enough resources to kill them solely based on their HP. However, their posture is a different matter. Especially with prosthetics like the axe, I can deal insane amounts of posture damage as well as a decent chunk of normal HP. So even if I cannot kill the ogre via its health, if I could maintain the pressure long enough, I could fill its posture bar and kill it that way. But even if I land all 7 hits right now, the posture bar will not fill, although it is incredibly close. I need a very slight edge. And this edge comes in the form of this singular aqueous sugar that you can find here. It increases the health damage I deal by 12.5%, but more importantly, it also increases the posture damage I deal by 25%. This is the final key to this encounter. It is worth noting, however, that it is the only aqueous sugar that I can get by this point in the game. In other words, I have only one shot to kill the ogre, and if I fail, I will have to restart, which did happen once. Thankfully, this is still in the early game, so I didn't waste too much time, about 25 to 30 minutes to get back to where I was. But finally, with enough concentration, I managed to down the ogre and have thus passed the first major roadblock of the run. Immediately afterwards is a mini-boss general, whom I leave for later when I have a reasonable amount of spirit emblems, taunt the snake, and then finally reach the oboe. Now, I can finally get my Welp, I guess I go to plan B then. Cheese. So even if I do not have enough damage to kill this guy, there is something else I can do. Namely, I can abuse gravity and the AI's suicidal thoughts. I can climb on top of this tower, jump over here, and eventually bait the boss to fall off the map. Now, some might call this abuse of the mental state of others amoral, disgusting, or maybe even borderline psychopathic, and they would be correct in all 3 instances. However, this also obeys the rules of the run, since they merely state how I am supposed to deal damage. They say nothing about others offing themselves. So as far as I care, mental health can go straight to the trash. That being said, getting the oboe to fall off was anything but easy. Firstly, I had never performed such a trick before, so I obviously sucked ass at doing the climb and the jump, even though I practiced on another playthrough for about an hour and a half. Secondly, the AI adapts its pathing based on the player's pathing. Groundbreaking, I know, but the reason I'm putting emphasis on it is that, depending on where I initially go when the fight begins, the oboe will take a different route. Some routes giving me enough time to make the jump, whilst in others he breaks the tower, and the resulting situation can basically be summed up like that. I swear, this fight made Sekiro homosexual and left me scarred for life. One quirk that happened was that sometimes the AI bugged and caused Gyobu to just run around in circles. It was funny for about a minute until I realized that this loop was endless. I tried throwing shurikens at him, but even that didn't cure him of his autistic tendencies. The only thing that did work was when I got down and got in range for him to puncture my asshole even more. But finally, I find a path around the boss that gives me enough time to do the climb, jump, and bait after 40 minutes of sexual trauma. Note, however, that I practiced killing him this way on a separate playthrough, so the actual amount of time is probably around 2 hours. I gotta say, if nothing else, it does feel rather satisfying to pull off my first ever cheese, even if it isn't considered the most difficult trick to perform. After that, I level up my attack power, go back to Hirata Estate, and for Christ's sake, finally! At long last, I have a way to farm emblems, so I kill a bunch of archers, unlock the Mikiri counter, and go off to fight Shinobi Hunter Enshin. There really isn't much to talk about this fight since the Mikiri does way too much posture damage to him, and on top of that, his posture regens really slowly. It is annoying to try and kite the other enemies in the arena, but even despite that, I managed to down him on my first attempt. Afterwards, I explore Hirata Estate, buy some emblems, go back to Ashina, kill the first general for the court seat, as well as my first prayer bead necklace, and then head towards the second general. One trick I found whilst fighting him was what I like to call the emblem reset. It's the workaround I was talking about earlier. I decide to clean up some of the enemies surrounding the general first, so I could lure and isolate him. After the cleanup duty is done, I go back to the idol here. However, I do not rest, as that would reset all of the enemies. Instead, I use the money I had acquired from them to purchase new emblems and continue fighting. So as long as I have money in me, I could clean up everything and fight any mini-boss without being interrupted by some random dickhead. Now all that is left is to go to Ashina Castle, and from there...
Oh shit, here we go again.
Yup, it's cheesing time again. At the time I had no idea how to kill the bull, so I decided to skip it. And then I spent 45 minutes failing this jump like a complete fucking idiot. But after I do it, I unlock a huge part of the map. I now have access to 4 separate areas, tons of items, prosthetics, and new mini-bosses to kill. However, since I blitzed through the areas to loot everything I possibly can, there isn't really anything to say about them. As for the mini-bosses, most of them did not give me much trouble, so unless I have something interesting to share, I will say a couple of words and move on. For now, the plan is to increase the maximum emblems I can hold by killing the Shichimen warrior in the abandoned dungeon and getting the ceremonial Tanto, until I realize that this is impossible as I have no way of dealing damage to apparitions right now, and that I did not have the airborne death blow unlocked. So I leave it for later. Instead, I run to Senpu Tempo and kill the armored warrior on my second attempt. It was quite an easy fight as his posture does not regen. After abusing Newton's laws again to get past him, I pick up the Senpu esoteric text. Afterwards, I get back to Ashina Castle, grab the gourd seed, Sabimaru, and Gyobu's horn, parry the Ashina elite to death in about 20 seconds, and complete the Nayama's questline so he now sells me an unlimited amount of Aku sugar, as well as a bunch of prosthetic upgrade materials. Then I fight the 7 Ashina spears. I manage to stealth blow his first health bar quite easily, and for the rest, I dodge to the sides and retaliate with the axe to chip his health, Mikiri him a couple of times, and manage to down him first try, albeit getting pretty close to having 7 Ashina spears shoved up my ass. Afterwards, I try my luck with the Lone Shadow Long Swordsman, but he proves to be quite a bit more challenging than the 7 Ashina spears. Still blowing his first health bar from above is easy enough, but even so, he's quite annoying because he parries me most of the times I try to hit him with the axe, and also doesn't give many openings to counterattack him from the sides or the back. Also, after I hit him with the axe, he hits me back a couple times, but then he stays passive afterwards, regenerating his posture. One funny thing that happened though was that during the fight he glitched into the fog wall. I don't know how that happened, but I thought it's worth mentioning. But from this fight a few things become apparent. Firstly, this run introduces a new playstyle of sorts, which some enemies are more vulnerable to than others. More specifically, the bosses and mini-bosses that are aggressive are quite easier to deal with because they can be parried more often and their posture bar will not regenerate as long as they are attacking me. And then there is the second group, which is more prone to being passive and hence regenerate their posture bar. This is due to the game itself not being adapted to this playstyle. Sekiro relies on constant attacking and counterattacking, learning and mastering the attack patterns of enemies and then killing them with precision. The prosthetics and parries only playstyle throws all of that out of the window and relies solely on the enemy being overly aggressive and then punishing that aggression. Hence, for every enemy that is not aggressive, I will need to be creative. Secondly, emblems, since beating the game with 7 emblems is not exactly doable. And so I set out to farm my emblems and begin my cosplay of an average Japanese farmer. I don't want to worry about them for a long time, so I intend to max out on 999 emblems. For a farm spot I choose this place, right after the Shinobi Hunter. It has 6 archers in total, 4 before the bridge, 1 on the lookout, and 1 patrolling right after the idol. It is the most optimal farm spot I managed to think of. So how bad was it? It was, mildly speaking, absolutely fucking horrible. Killing all 6 archers gave me 138 gold, increased to 168 gold or 16.8 emblems after I unlocked the 2 virtuous deed passives from the Senpu skill tree, and it took me about 40 seconds on average to kill all of them and rested the idol. If we subtract the 12 emblems required to one-shot the 6 archers with the axe, this yielded 4.8 emblems in 40 seconds. If you do the math, it would take me about 140 minutes to grind out 999 emblems, assuming I do not miss or do literally anything else. In reality, it took me about 4 hours to grind them out. It was miserable. At least I was able to farm plenty of XP along the way too, and as a result I got a lot of new skills. I ignored the active skills since most of them involved using a sword and focused on getting passive ones instead. They were not that game changing, but there are a couple that would absolutely make a difference in the run when I eventually get them. And so, with the harvest complete, I buy the anti-air deathblow text from Blackhead Badger and attempt my luck with the Shichimen Warrior. I die a couple of times and I run out of divine confetti. For some reason, at the time when I fought him, I thought I could only perform an aerial deathblow on him if I had confetti. Because of this, I thought he was impossible until I got confetti again, so I left him for later. If only I could go back in time to slap myself in the face. I go back to Ashina Castle, rescue the info broker, and head to fight the Lone Shadow Longswordsman again. I try using a combination of shurikens and firecrackers to get him to maintain his aggression on me, and manage to get 2 good hits with the axe. Ultimately, I barely clutch the fight as he spams me with attacks towards the end, which is just enough to break his posture and kill him. I guess brute force does pay off sometimes. And with that, the path to Mibu Village is open. Immediately after the Lone Shadow is a Snake Eyes mini-boss. I get behind her, stealth blow her, kite her to the fog wall in the back where her sims can't see me, and easily kill her as she's hyper-aggressive and gives plenty of openings to hit her with the axe. In Mibu Village, I grabbed the gourd seed, 1 divine confetti, as well as the pine resin ember. I got back to the Shichimen Warrior and finally managed to kill him by death blowing him in the air twice and acquire the ceremonial Tanto, the first major power spike of the run. It can provide up to 15 additional emblems, nearly doubling the maximum amount of damage that I can output, making the run so much more manageable. Although each use of the item costs half my health, the payoff is far too great to ignore. Besides, lack of healing was never an issue in the run to begin with. What is an issue, however, are the 2 bosses blocking my progression of the game, as well as a turret for which I would have to kill a mini-boss surrounded by 1 billion enemies to even reach it. I'm most scared of Genichiro, so I decide to kill the monk and Lady Butterfly first, so that I would deal as much damage as possible to him. I won't fight him yet though. I don't know exactly what to expect, so I want to go in well prepared. And thus begins my mini-boss murder spree for experience and prayer beads. The first victim is the 3rd General. This guy is particularly pesky because of the 4 gunmen near him. Also, for some reason, I always sucked fighting him in particular. I have no idea why. The strat I use for him is I kill the gunman first, then I de-aggro him so I can stealth blow him and proceed to fight him one-on-one, making use of the emblem reset. It takes me a couple tries, but I manage to kill him eventually. 1 down, on to the next. Following up is Tokujiro the Glutton. Again, I bait and kill the enemies around him first and then deal with him. I kill the monkeys easily enough with shurikens, pop an Akko Sugar, and notice I deal 0 damage to the guy. Now, I could definitely kill him with just parrying as he's incredibly aggressive, but I thought that it would be lame as prosthetics wouldn't really be a contributing factor in that case. I decide to leave him for later when my axe is powerful enough to penetrate the vast amounts of body fat that is protecting him, all in the name of entertainment. After Tokujiro, I go to Sunken Valley, pick up the gourd seed along the way, and fight the 2nd Snake Eyes. She is exactly the same as the previous one, the only difference being that now I fight her with 2 health bars instead of 1. This time, however, I also have an ace up my sleeve. 15 more emblems from the ceremonial Tanto, which are enough to take her down relatively smoothly. Next is the long-arm centipede giraffe at Gunfort. I kill him in about 30 seconds. The only interesting thing I do is that instead of doing the jump counter, I hit him with the axe while I'm in the air. It isn't necessary, but it does put the prosthetics in prosthetics only. I also make sure to pick up the large fan. After that, I finally pluck up enough courage to face Juzol the Drunkard. But before I even touch the fat piece of shit, I will have to clear out all of his OnlyFans subscribers. I thought it would be 8, but the emblem reset made things significantly easier than I had thought. It is enough to kill them all and to enter the fight with a decent amount of emblems, if not maximum emblems. Whilst killing them, I also get enough experience to unlock the Sculptor's Karma Blood skill to increase my maximum emblem capacity to 17. For the enemies surrounding Druzo, I recruit the Samurai to make things faster, once again make use of the emblem reset to clear them out, and with only Druzo left, I stealth blow his first health bar and successfully 1v1 him on my third attempt by abusing his aggression. And now here I am, my first legitimate boss of the run. No more fancy skips or tricks to save me, it's just me and the babushka. Lady Butterfly isn't exactly aggressive, but she isn't passive either. However, for this fight, I want to be a bit creative. Instead of using the axe, I use the shurikens, which deal roughly the same damage to the boss as long as they knock her down from the air. More importantly, they cost only 1 emblem instead of 2, which means I have a ton more potential damage I can deal. The whole fight revolves around me waiting for her to jump into the air, knock her down with shurikens, deflect and dodge while she's on the ground, kite the illusion attack in phase 2, rinse and repeat until dead. I waste quite a few shots with my shurikens, which lead to me having to awkwardly wait around for her to get aggressive enough so that her posture doesn't regenerate. But eventually, I get lucky enough and manage to down her on my first try, the whole attempt taking me around 9 minutes. Also, whilst fighting her, I realize that I can make use of the Divine Confetti when fighting. I'm not going to attack with the sword, but they do buff the posture damage I deal upon deflection, and every little advantage is welcome at this point. After Lady Butterfly, I decide to procrastinate and wrap up some leftover administrative work. I buy the umbrella from Black Cat Badger, upgrade some prosthetics, and go up against the Blazing Bull. I try giving it a heart attack with the firecrackers, but that doesn't work. So instead, I check out a guide made by Tyrannicon. All it boils down to is sparing the bull when it does its charging attack, which gives me an opening to counterattack its head with the axe. It doesn't deal that much HP damage, but it more than makes up for that with the posture damage it inflicts on the thing. It is made all the better by the fact that the bull has an incredibly low posture regenerate. It goes down as well. After the bull, I finally go up against Kenichiro. Not long after the fight had started, I notice a few glaring problems. The most worrying one is that I straight up don't have enough damage to kill him. I have to deal quite a bit of damage to him in order for his posture regen to disappear. But even if I get the damage from the remembrance of the fake monk, the damage from Yashiriku sugar, and the posture damage from the confetti, it would still not be enough. Alright, then how about putting pressure on him and killing him purely by posture? After all, the axe does do quite a bit of posture damage upon hit. And that is a good idea, were it not for the fact that he's incredibly passive. I never noticed this until now, but if you actually do not attack Genichiro, chances are you will just sit there and stare at each other for an uncomfortable period of time, waiting for the other to attack. It's obvious I won't be able to defeat him even if luck was on my side. I barely managed to get his posture half filled in his second phase when I run out of emblems. And there is a third phase which I can't even reach. So after 13 minutes I finally die and then get to brainstorming. From all of this, a few things become apparent. The main problem is that I need to increase the maximum damage I could output by a lot, and fast. But how can I do that? The only way I could do that was by buffing myself with sugars and killing bosses. Since the killing bosses part isn't really an option right now, as my damage would probably not be enough for the fake monk either, I have to think outside the box. So I go back to farming money and experience, looking to discover new options. Although I could farm the radar archers for money, they only yield 34 experience each. And since each skill point I get increases the amount of experience required to get the next one, farming them for XP is more and more quickly getting out of the question. In fact, here is a table from the Sekiro official guide that shows how much each skill point costs. I would rather castrate myself than farm these guys for the later levels. I needed a new farming spot, that much was certain, and that spot was Mibu Village. With the money I procured from killing the archers, I upgraded the loaded spear to unlock its cleave form. The Mibu villagers are generally pretty close to one another, they respawn, and there are tons of them. On top of that, they have pretty low health. That meant I could easily get them to group up together, cleave them 2 times with the spear, and shower in the 87 experience that each villager would give me. I farmed them for a bit until I reached 2 skill points. Then I checked my skill tree to see what I could get, and I found something so incredibly overpowered, I felt stupid for not getting it earlier. I would go as far as to say that this is the skill that single-handedly carried the rest of the run on its back, and that would be the Fang and Blade passive. The way that this works is it allows the player to spin the axe as much as they want for slightly less posture and HP damage before ending the spinning attack with a normal attack. That is well known. What is important is that each spin costs 2 emblems, but the normal attack at the end of the combo costs nothing. So if I was to spin the axe only once and then do the normal attack after, the combo would cost me 2 emblems. I could now do 2 attacks instead of 1 for the same cost. This doubled my maximum damage output. I also got the projected force skill after that, as it allowed a very useful attack with the... Did you see that? That sword movement? The one that is specifically banned? After I wasted my time, I finally grew some balls and went up against the fake monk. And holy shit, it's doable! The strat I used was to stick to her side like glue, and when she performed attacks that would leave her exposed for a longer time, I would dash to her side, spin my axe for a hit, and by the time she counterattacks me, I would have already hit her a second time with the normal attack. Although this usually resulted in her dealing damage to me, I had more than enough healing and health to tank and sustain it. Eventually, I managed to bring her HP low enough so that she didn't regen as much posture, deflected her attack spam, and took her down. I enhanced my attack power, grabbed the Shelter Stone, and with my newly acquired superpowers went back to Genichiro. And he was a fair bit more complicated than the monk due to his aforementioned desire to be submissive rather than to dominate. Even with my new insanely raised damage cap, he still proved tricky. I started off experimenting to see when my openings would be, and noticed that he would almost always parry one of the attacks of my combo. So if I hit him with my first attack, he would parry the second, and vice versa. I tried running away to bait him to attack me, but that didn't really work. But the longer I fought him, the more I started to notice a pattern which repeats for many other blade-wielding enemies in the game, not just Genichiro. If I let my spinning attack be blocked, this would cause Genichiro to counterattack me, but since he hasn't finished his attack animation in time, in 99% of the time I will strike him with my normal attack and deal damage to him at the risk of tanking his counterattack. This gave me an almost guaranteed way of dealing damage, especially to bosses and enemies which could block my attacks. My theory for what happens is that fundamentally, Sekiro's combat relies on attacking and counterattacking. So when I attack Genichiro, the AI enters this default state of blocking my attack. But since there is a delay between the spin and the normal attack of the combo, the AI interprets this delay as me being passive and counterattacks me, which in turn results in guaranteed damage for me. Now again, this does mean I would have to tank a fair bit in this fight and in fights to come, so I will need to be careful. With that being said, I attempted a different tactic. I tried being extremely aggressive, always sticking to Genichiro and attacking him with the axe, occasionally stopping to heal. The idea was to capitalize on the insane posture damage I dealt to him with the combo. I also tried having Aku sugar up as much as possible. Despite dealing a lot of HP damage to him with direct hits, it was still important not to lose the momentum and keep the pressure on as his posture regen was pretty solid. But that gave much better results than previous attempts. I finally reached phase 3 and died right at the start. Granted, this was because I played rather sloppily as it was my first attempt with this strategy, but not due to a lack of damage. So this was it. Instead of continuing though, I decided to gear up a little bit more to make the fight slightly easier. So I went and killed Tokujiro, realized I had underwater breathing unlocked and went exploring
under the water.
Found out I could not fish with shurikens, watched this headless learn to fly, and bought the gourd seed from the Battlefield Memorial mob. I also first tried Oren, mind you, not because I'm good at the game, but rather because she seemed to be unfamiliar with the word chill. I also discovered that I could finally one-shot the Mibu villagers with my spear, making the XP farm significantly faster. Speaking of which, I must have reduced the local peasant population by approximately 100% to increase my emblem cap from 17 to 19. With all of the min-maxing done, I went back to Genichiro, now with 9 healing gourd charges, more health, even more raised damage cap, and a ton of Akko sugar. As before, I tried to be as aggressive as possible, making sure to always have Akko sugar up. There was also a little luck involved, as sometimes he would dash backwards out of the axe's reach and demolish me with his ball, sometimes he would jump upwards and bonk me, and sometimes he would kick me out of my combo. So yeah, I also had to account for the AI's bullshit. But eventually, I get a very good attempt, reach phase 3 with 10 emblems, which proved to be just enough to get this son of a bitch down, after a grand total of an hour of attempts. And man, it felt so rewarding to finally get past him. Even though overall he took me less time to beat compared to Gyobu, he was without a doubt much harder, requiring a lot of planning, preparation, and improvisation to defeat. And with this ginormous hurdle out of the way, I unlocked 2 new bosses. I wanted to start with the folding screen monkeys first, so I listened carefully to a bunch of important sounding exposition. I also wanted to spice up the run, and that's why I only have 2 resurrections instead of 3. Afterwards, I rang the bell and entered the dream. It actually took me longer to find a guide on how to speedrun this boss than to actually beat the boss itself. Easy attack power and another sword for my collection. And now on to the more interesting fight, the Guardian Ape. The plan for this fight was straightforward enough. Get to phase 2 with 4 or 5 emblems and it's a free win. The problem was getting to phase 2 since the axe didn't do shit against this thing. It also moved around a lot, making it difficult to hit. And then halfway through the fight, I had a bright idea. The ape is a beast, so maybe the firecrackers would work well here. So I tried it and... yep, that should be it. On my next 2 attempts, I popped Akko Sugar and in both was a sliver of posture away from beating it before it got away and wiped the ground with my face. I needed just the slightest possible nudge and the fight would be mine. And so, I finally bring out the big guns, Yashariku Sugar. Whereas Akko Sugar gave me a 25% posture damage increase, Yashariku gave me a 50% increase. So I went at it again and was left speechless. I beat the first phase of the ape in 10 seconds. This was so clean. I am incredibly proud of that. Needless to say, phase 2 was a breeze as I had more than enough emblems to pull out the centipede with the spear, get rid of the posture regen and parry it to death. After that, I grabbed the flower and went to fight the headless ape variant. Phase 1 was the same as before, and for phase 2 I resorted to kiting the brown monkey, got in the face of the headless one when the other one was away, parry, spear, rinse and repeat until dead. After that, I BM'd the wife, killed the husband for psychopathic reasons, and returned to Ashina. And found it infiltrated by the Interior Ministry and Owl's weeaboos. This meant only one thing: more shit for me to steal. And stole. I did. I looted everything, fought the chained ogre, and noticed something interesting. The ogre one-shots these guys. And coincidentally, killing these guys is a great way to farm scrap magnetite, as I could only buy a limited amount of it from traders. And since they would be too much of a pain to kill normally, I decided to form a business relationship with the ogre, akin to that of an e-girl and a Discord moderator. He would give me whatever I want, and I would reward him with feed pics. If I felt like it. After hiring my first employee, I went on to upgrade a couple of prosthetics and killed Lone Shadow Masanaga, this time being much easier with the new damage cap. Then I tried my luck with Lone Shadow Vilehand, and what do you know, I got double teamed. I can handle one of these guys, but 2 of them are a bit too much. I tried throwing ceramic shards to distract the guy at the door so that I could death blow the mini-boss, but it didn't work. I tried resetting the aggro with a bite down, but to no avail again. Both of them would aggro me, even with their backs turned to me. So yeah, now was probably not a good time to fight them. Even the game itself gave me a hint by informing me that someone had contracted every single disease from this list by watching my gameplay. I got the jest and moved on to an even bigger ass whooping. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the endgame. From this point onwards, we're to expect some of the most brutal fights in the run. All of them will be Razor 10. Each emblem could mean the difference between success or failure, so even a single wasted axe strike or even a single wasted shuriken could spell my doom. None of them will be easy, and none of them will be quick. And there is not one, not two, not even three, but four of these behemoths. And right off the bat, the endgame of Sekiro gives me its regards by putting me face to face with the first of these four monstrosities, Lady Emma and Isshin Ashina. Where do I even start? Well, the fact that I absolutely suck at fighting Emma would probably be a good start. I just haven't fought her that much. Compounding this issue is the fact that she deals pretty decent damage, and I absolutely felt the pain every time I got hit. Luckily for me, she is quite squishy, both in terms of posture and HP, so it took about 4 to 5 direct hits with the axe before her posture regen was crippled and she could be downed. This amount could be reduced with enough pressure and luck, but she generally took me around 10 emblems to kill. I did manage to get past her on my first attempt, but it did cost me 6 healing flask chargers and 12 emblems. Honestly, not too bad of a start. You know, for a second I did think that maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. And so did Sekiro, just look at that smile. Well, I can tell you that smile disappeared pretty soon after Isshin sliced Sekiro in half. And he did it again, and again, and again. On top of that, I seem to be a classic example of someone who does pretty decently when they first try something and then does abysmally afterwards. So not only did Isshin wreck me, but so did Emma. Great. But obviously, the problem wasn't so much me being bad at the fight. It was, but it also wasn't something I wouldn't be able to fix after I died enough times. There were two glaring problems. One, Emma dashed around like a maniac. Seriously, it felt like she had a sugar rush. And it was really annoying because sometimes she would dash out of my combo, cause me to waste emblems, put myself out of position, counterattack me, or kill me. And it wasn't even something predictable. If I could compare this situation to something, it would be attempting to blitz down a glass cannon. You have no guarantee if you will kill it first or it will you. At least Isshin seemed to be suffering from arthritis, so he wasn't as mobile. But he did suffer from 2, being a scumbag. Why is that? It is solely because of his dodge and counterattack move, and he loves to spam it, just as Emma likes to spam her dashes. Additionally, Isshin deals more damage than Emma, and since I could not predict when he would use the dodge, this meant that using the combo was too dangerous and ineffective. So for him, I had to resort to normal attacks, meaning that I had to do Emma perfectly without wasting too many emblems or I would not have enough for the rest of the fight. I died about 10 times before I ran out of Akko sugar, so while I was grinding money to buy it from Anayama, I got enough XP to get the first of the 2 healing gourd upgrades and also realized I had forgotten to equip the sparkling axe upgrade. Well, better late than never. At least now my axe dealt even more damage, dealt chip damage through enemy blocking, and could burn enemies if I was aggressive enough. With these new upgrades I went back to the fight. It was still pretty hard, but now I had finally begun to feel comfortable enough with the fight to formulate a strategy. For Emma, I noticed I had 2 openings in which I was relatively safe to use the combo, the grab and the Ashina cross. I could just dash or walk to her side and was golden. For everything else, I used the normal attack. Luckily, she was relatively aggressive as long as I was in her face, which allowed me to quickly build up her posture. The Mikiri also does quite a bit of posture damage to her. In some attempts, I would get lucky and she would chain the grab, cross and or Mikiri, which allowed me to kill her with just 6 to 8 emblems. Isshin was a bit more RNG as he depended on how many emblems I had used for Emma, and due to her dash unpredictability, this number could range between 6 and 14. Compared to Emma though, Isshin did give me quite a bit more openings such as the grab, the Ichimonji and all of his special phase 2 attacks. I abused them in the same way. Dodge or walk sideways and counterattack. Oh, and I also had to make sure I always had Akko sugar up before I used the axe. With this approach, I did manage to progress more and more in the fight, which ultimately culminated in this. Fuck my life. But after a couple more attempts and a grand total of around 20 attempts, I did manage to successfully beat Lady Emma and Isshin Ashina. Thank Christ! This was one of the most skill-demanding fights as of that point in the run, and it was only gonna get worse from here, but at least for the moment, I got to enjoy my victory and celebrate by taking out all of my sorrow and rage on my dad as well as thousands of innocent people. Truly, what a blissful moment.
違う、そなたは
Yeah, trust me kid, if you went through what I went through, you'd also want to get the bad ending. Now getting the bad ending does technically prove that it is possible to beat Sekiro with prosthetics and parries only and no mods. It's a nice reward, but also not one that will satisfy me or you the viewer, I'm willing to bet. So if it wasn't already apparent, we're moving on. I reload the save and start the fight with Owl. The fight was over in about 2.5 minutes. I honestly don't even know what to comment about it. I punished his jump, his dash and bomb, and the rest he did for me as he was incredibly aggressive. Afterwards, I respected the people around me by putting a nice pair of earplugs, regrinded the healing gourd upgrade, finally cured brain rot, and unlocked the scarier version of Hirata Estate, which is also our next destination. And of course, I met with 2 gang fights back to back. For the dog Lone Shadow, I was a bit tired of using the axe so much and wanted to try something new. So I tried the finger whistle to get rid of the dogs. It was a very effective way of getting rid of them as the shadow would aggro them and kill them for me. I also baited him to come to the forest as otherwise there was the danger of having the ogres next to him join in on the gangbang as well, like it happened in this instance. As for the swordsman himself, he wasn't really a challenge when he was alone, but he was a bit overstated, which made filling his posture bar that extra bit tedious. On my successful attempt, I managed to somehow get him into this state where he didn't attack me nor did he parry any of my attacks. He was only trying to slowly walk back to his initial position. I attacked him a couple times during this period and ultimately that was the reason I beat the dog Lone Shadow. Under normal circumstances, I would have reset and tried to beat him properly. But at this point, I was getting quite tired of gang fights and just wanted to progress. Afterwards, I took a break from Hirata Estate and went to the Divine Realm where I went up against the true corrupted monk. I was a bit worried I wouldn't have enough damage, but that concern was completely unjustified. The monk is hyper aggressive and has pretty low posture regen for some reason. Coupled with that, I was at a point in the game at which my parries and Mikiri dealt significant chunks of posture damage, not to mention direct hits from the axe. And even though I played absolutely horribly, and even though I did not skip phase 2, I still managed to kill the monk first try with 6 emblems to spare. It was honestly a bit disappointing. After the monk, I grinded out my second healing gourd upgrade and went back to Hirata Estate for round 2 with Jozo. The plan I settled on was completely jank. First, I sneaked under the floor here, otherwise I would have to kill this group of raiders or, worse, be spotted by the ninjas on the roof, which would be a reset. After I had gotten past that section, I would get behind this stone and kill the archer on the right using 2 spinning shurikens. For the archer behind Jozo, I just used the axe to one-tap him. After that, I ran like crazy to reset the aggro of Jozo and the ninja next to him. When they reset, I would kill the raiders in the room to the left and do an emblem reset with the money I had acquired. Finally, I would stealth blow Jozo and then awkwardly kite him and Masanari around, taking pot shots at him whenever they separated. It took me a couple of tries, but I managed to down him relatively smoothly, the successful attempt taking me about 8.5 minutes, out of which I only fought Jozo for 3 minutes. And then, I met the second monster of the endgame, Al Father. So what made this fight so hard? Well, Al has Emma's dash and predictability, phase 2's disappearing magic tricks, which I will call dodges for short. They are not entirely unpredictable, but are incredibly annoying to deal with nonetheless. Decent posture regen and, contrary to his earlier counterpart, is quite passive. So firstly, the unpredictability meant single attacks only. Remember, the spinning attack deals slightly less damage than normal attacks, and right now, damage is key. Obviously, Aqua Sugar had to be up before an attack, but the problem this time was that there was a huge amount of RNG involved in him giving me an opening. Sometimes there wasn't too much time between separate openings, but more often than not he would sit and stare at me for ages like someone suffering from level 3 autism. Speaking of openings, there are only 2, the Firecracker attack and the Overhead Slam. For both, I either dash or walk behind him and punish him. It sounds simple, but due to the aforementioned RNG, I had no way of knowing how effective each of my Aqua Sugars would be. Also, in almost every single attempt, my 3 sugar charges ran out before or a little into phase 2. And phase 2 has all of those problems as well, but it also introduces this feathery astral fuck. This little shit causes Al to sometimes disappear when I attacked him. It certainly seemed quite problematic at first, but after a while I noticed that he would perform these dodges on his own without me attacking. Not only that, but after he did such a dodge, there was a period of time in which Al was guaranteed not to do another dodge. I'm not sure exactly how long this period is, but it had to be at least 20 seconds. So with all of this in mind, phase 2 essentially had to be fought in bursts of around 20 seconds and a lot of waiting. Every time he dodged, I waited for an opening that would be within 20 seconds of the dodge, if he would even give me one at all. But above all else, this fight was so incredibly difficult because it was absolutely even. It felt so much like a fight between two equally matched great warriors, the winner being the one who could endure longer. And to win, I had to be absolutely perfect. One miss, and I was out. And on top of that, it was not short. A standard attempt lasted between 6 and 10 minutes, in which I had to be concentrated, precise, keep good track of time in the second phase, and of course, deal with all of his regular attacks. There was no trick, I had a plan devised, I simply had to execute it flawlessly. I loved every second of it. In between my attempts, I got the 10th gourd seed as well as the final spirit emblem capacity upgrade, capping to 35 total. Now I absolutely could have gone for the divine dragon, gotten attack power from it and gained the upper hand over Owl. But frankly, I was enjoying myself too much and I also presume it is more entertaining for you, the viewer, so I didn't do it. As for the upgrades, the healing didn't really affect the fight that much, but the extra emblem certainly did, allowing me one additional spinning shuriken. I also started using divine confetti to boost my posture damage upon deflection. I did not dare to use Yashiriku's sugar however, as there was a pretty decent chance Owl would not give me even a single opening during the time it was active. Besides, I wanted to save up as many of them as possible for later on, and also they would be really difficult to farm. And so, with each passing attempt, my sense of the fight improved, I grew more precise, more cautious, and at long last, I reached the dreaded moment when I run out of emblems and pray that I have done enough damage to break his posture. I have divine confetti. Press on. And claim my victory. I would say that thus far, this was the most rewarding moment of the run. 2 down, 2 to go. Subsequently, I discovered a new grinding spot, the best so far, and it is this place, right here, between the 3rd and 4th idol and fountainhead. I would go around one-shotting nobles with the spear, a normal run producing on average 1,500 gold and 3,500 XP per minute. Very nice. I also abused the hell out of my business relationship with the ogre and got a couple of prosthetic upgrades. After I was done, I relieved my employee of duty, luckily before payday. Now, this is probably the right time to mention that if you're ever doing any sort of farming or grinding, it may be a good idea to do something alongside it. In my case, the way I chose to prevent myself from going insane in such trying times was by sitting in a Discord voice chat with some of my friends. Because there is nothing better than doing something objectively monotonous and maddening whilst discussing various interesting topics with other people. Topics such as if certain people were on steroids, how violently we would take away each other's virginities, or if I had recorded said Discord voice chats, all of the possible things that could have been said and would get me banned from YouTube. Such joys in life are truly few and far between. Anyways, the upgrades. I got the Phantom Kunai, which I wanted to test on the Shichimen warrior in the Sunken Valley and see if I dealt damage with their projectiles to it. I deathblowed his first health bar as I did to his relative, and lo and behold, this actually works. Not that I would ever use it in a normal run, but hey, at least now I had a way to actually use prosthetics against these guys. After a couple tries and some parrying, I managed to down him and get the Malcontents ring, the last material I needed in order to get to the Lazulite prosthetics. Speaking of Lazulite prosthetics, I could only get 2 of them in the run as the maximum amount of Lazulite I could obtain was 6. Well, in my case it was more like 5 as there are not enough carb scales to loot so as to complete the Pod Noble's questline. Oh sorry, did I say 5? I meant 3, because I could get another 2 from the Demon of Hatred, which I had no idea how I would beat. And with that, the number of Lazulite prosthetics dropped from 2 to 1. So which one would I get then? Well, the choice was between the Lazulite Axe and the Lazulite Sacred Flame for reasons I will talk about later. But that choice very much depended on how things turned out later on in the run, as I still had 2 boss fights of which I was deathly scared. But before them, there was the Divine Dragon. During the first phase, I cleaved all of the white dragons with the spear. I was worried for a second I would run out of emblems, but due to their squishy nature, that didn't happen. The second phase I did normally, as unfortunately it is impossible to do with prosthetics and parries only. This is also where the run should technically end, but I thought it would be very lame to end the run because of a gimmick fight. So, I chopped some onions and returned to Ashina. One last time, filled with anxiety. I looted everything and grabbed all the idols. Before I faced the final two, I wanted everything else out of the way. I killed the red-eyed Ashina elite pretty quickly, similar to how I killed the non-red-eyed one. For the 7 Ashina spears, I used Gaijin Sugar to sneak behind him undetected and stealth blow his first HP bar, kited him and his no-homo friend, poked him as much as I could, and clutched him with 0 potions. I then spent a stupid amount of time missing the drop on the third Chichiman warrior like a fucking idiot and eventually gave up as it was honestly getting embarrassing. For Shigenechi, I pop a Gaijin Sugar, kill this guy and stealth blow his first HP bar. I then used the spear to pull off his armor, which honestly dealt a surprising amount of posture damage. I immediately capitalized on this fact and finished him off easily. And now for the grand finale. I'm sure all of you have been waiting for this. What better send-off than to face the 2 toughest bosses in this run back to back? Well, without further ado, let's get into it. So before anything else, I wanted to find out if the Demon of Hatred was even possible to begin with. It's a 3-phase beast type fight, so the main problem is already apparent. The axe obviously wasn't a good choice here, as although it did a solid chunk of posture damage, it was nowhere near enough to get me through all 3 phases. I honestly do not think it would be enough, even if by some miracle the demon stayed still the entire time. Next up was the finger whistle. It probably would have been more effective to finger the demon instead, because the whistle doesn't deal any damage, only stuns it for a bit. Next up was the spiral spear. It did a solid amount of HP damage and cost only 1 emblem, but again, on its own, it would not be enough to get me through the entire fight. However, it did give me an idea. I could not kill the demon solely on health, true, but maybe I did not need to. Instead, what if I got its HP low enough and started parrying it for posture? And that actually worked. I managed to get into its second phase. Then I died. But I got what I came for. A way to kill the demon, as well as some peace of mind knowing that at least one of the 2 final obstacles was passable. Now it is time to put myself against the true final boss of this run, Ishin the Sword Saint, and his failure of a grandson. This fight was the pinnacle of the prosthetics and parry only run, challenging everything I had learned thus far. Every skill, every trick, every prosthetic, every emblem, every sugar would be utilized to its maximum here, with no room for error. This was it. So, how long did this titan of a boss take me? It took me a grand total of 2 attempts. Wait, what? Seriously? Yes, seriously. I imagine you must be feeling disappointed to hear this. If you are, then you understand how I felt. This wasn't the victory I was seeking. I had been dreading Ishin from day one. A 4-phase fight. The final boss, the epic ending to this video. But instead, he went down in 8 minutes across my 2 attempts. I thought that Genichiro in phase 1 Ishin would be so passive that I would be left with no emblems for the rest of the fight. Genichiro is passive, yes, but it didn't matter because the axe demolished him, and Ishin was actually quite aggressive during his first phase, as long as I'm close to him. I tanked and spanked his ass and parried his sword. I did manage to do this, which I think looks pretty badass. The second and third phase are when he gets insanely aggressive. I punished his jumps and lightning attacks, he attacked me constantly and let me perform the occasional Mikiri 2, which built up his posture pretty quickly. And just like that, he was down. Well, that was anticlimactic. But luckily the Demon of Hatred was still up. Surely a 3-phase beast type fight would give me a way bigger run for my money. I beat it on the first try. Well, technically the fourth if we include the test runs from right before Ishin. The plan with the spear worked great. I tried to use 11 emblems per phase as that was enough to basically nullify its posture regen, after which point I proceeded to parry it as much as I could. On a side note, I didn't actually know that the chip damage and fire buildup this boss is famous for only happen if it attacked me with its flame arm, so that was nice to find out. What's more, it actually did attacks I had never seen before as a result of me parrying it, such as this triple hit slam. And that's about it. The run is over, but I'm not content letting it end like that. I went back and killed Lone Shadow Vilehand, this time trying the spear on him. It worked quite well, who could have guessed? With the power of late game stats, he went down pretty easily. Yeah, that was not it either. There had to be something else I could do, and luckily there was. Do you remember the choice of Lazulite prosthetics I still had to make? I was saving for the Lazulite axe in case Ishin proved too difficult, but we all saw how that turned out. But I still haven't answered what mentally ill reasoning led me to even consider the Last Light Sacred Flame as a viable option. Well, the reason is quite simple. It is this sentence right here, and there are still headless to hunt. Ladies and gentlemen, we have work to do. So, one last time, I went grinding. I farmed the materials required for the Last Light Sacred Flame from the Interior Ministry. Then I go to test my price, and maybe, just maybe... Now that is something I'm willing to end the video on. And after finally ungaying myself, I am happy to say that it is possible to beat Sekiro, prosthetics and parries only, with no mods. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves.